Time for Back Pages tonight here on Sky Sports News, bringing you a first look at the sports stories in the morning newspapers. With us on this occasion, Michail Delaney, chief football writer at The Independent, and Sam Dean, football reporter for the Daily and Sunday Telegraph. Welcome both. Quick look through the back pages first of all, and here's what the papers are going with. The Guardian, Bowen wins it, referring to that vital relegation match which West Ham won against Wolves. Wins it for Warrior Antonio. More on that to come. Red card for referee. David Coote in the news today. In the newspaper, this one's for you. United sizing up move for Campos as Arsenal hover. January transfer window not far away. The Mirror. Fact. Ange Postecoglou getting the backing of the Tottenham hierarchy despite their dodgy run. And again, Michail Antonio attributes to him featuring in reporting of West Ham's win. Looking at the Mail, City and Chelsea hit £60 million jackpot. That is in relation to the revamped Club World Cup coming up next summer. The Times. Coote sacked over scandals. More on the dismissal of referee David Coote, who may have more trouble in store yet. So let's start with Michail Delaney and the Eye, as with all the back pages, focusing heavily on that relegation battle at the London Stadium, which went the way of Souček and Bowen, and maybe above all Julian Lopetegui, because it did seem pretty clear, Michail, that a defeat, certainly a bad one, might have spent the end for the manager.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's not been a good start to the season for Lopetegui. The West Ham fans don't seem to have taken to him or the football. And yet the one thing you would say for him is he has this capacity that some managers have in these situations to, just when you think it's about to go past the point where this is untenable, they pull a win out. This has happened now. Is this the fourth or fifth time it's happened this season with Lopetegui? It does speak to a certain amount of character, even if it's maybe not sustainable. But for the moment, from that result, you'd think that Lopetegui has a much better chance of seeing 2025 as manager of his club, West Ham, than Gary O'Neill does as manager of Wolves, because suddenly, I suppose, the focus there really switches. O'Neill, it feels like there's been consensus that he would have been in real trouble had they not beaten Fulham 2 weeks ago. A result that seems all the more surprising, actually, given how Fulham frustrated Arsenal yesterday. But since then, they haven't really built momentum on it, and it does feel like it could be a matter of time there.
How much time, Sam Dean?
Well, based on reports last week and from my colleagues at the Telegraph, not very much time at all, potentially, because we reported that O'Neill's job was effectively hanging by a thread ahead of this game. And I know this game was dubbed sort of across the media as El Sacico, which obviously is quite cruel, but really painted a picture. And it was quite an unusual situation, really, for two teams to be coming into this with their managers in such perilous positions at the exact same time. And you look at that Wolves performance tonight and the sort of continued lack of cohesion, the reliance on a player like Coote to just produce some magic out of nowhere. And it's hard to see the direction they're going in. What I would say, though, is that if this is the end for O'Neill, I think there should be some sympathy for him, because obviously in the summer he lost arguably two of his best three players, with Max Kilman going and Pedro Neto going too. And Wolves, because of their financial situation, have not really been able to replace them. So the situation's not been ideal for any manager. And O'Neill obviously did a good job last year too. So I can't imagine, if he does go, that he'll be out of work for too long. But equally, you look at the way they're defending, and this was their 15th goal they conceded from a set piece this season already, which is obviously the most in the league and pretty disastrous. You can't get away with that in the Premier League. And O'Neill, if reports are to be correct and to be proved correct, and Wolves do pull the trigger, that could be one of his big regrets this season.
Let's have a look at The Guardian, which, among other papers, focuses on the tributes and the support for Michail Antonio, much loved leading Premier League goalscorer for West Ham, was involved in that awful car accident at the weekend. And 9 minutes in, there was a minute of applause for West Ham's number 9. Michail, the club couldn't have done more, the fans couldn't have done more to show what he means to them.
Yeah, obviously, I mean, the match, the entire evening was emotionally framed by this. A terrible story from the weekend, although I suppose one positive, given that Antonio, I mean, he was communicating on Saturday. He's gone through an operation, and I suppose the perspective is better from that. And he would have been buoyed by just how much support and love he saw from a club he is so associated with. I mean, they really did. It's a cliche, but it's a cliche for a reason. These sort of things. They did him proud of the performance, and even the way they rallied in the second half. And yeah, it's a very touching gesture, and the obvious image of the night of his shirt being held up by his teammates.
So let me do what I sometimes do, rather unfairly, give you 15 seconds each to tell me where you think these two managers will be in 1 month's time as we enter the FA Cup third round.
9th of January.
Let's start with you, Sam. What do you think? Will they both still be in post?
I think Lopetegui will still be in post, and I think if I was gazing into my crystal ball, that Gary O'Neill will not be in post by Christmas.
How hazy is your crystal ball, Michail?
Yeah, I think O'Neill won't be, and Lopetegui. So what? It'll be 9th of January. We're going into the FA Cup weekend. Say he gets that weekend, they get a bad result, and then he goes.
Okay. Not looking,
my bet to do.
Not looking fantastically hopeful for either of them. Let's have a look at the Times back page as we continue our conversation. And David Coote is the big headline there. Coote sacked over scandals. Sam Dean, I guess this was pretty much a matter of time, one felt, having seen that he was immediately suspended. And to be clear, he's been sacked because of two of the three controversies surrounding him. The very derogatory comments about Liverpool and Jurgen Klopp and Klopp's nationality, and two, the video published by The Sun, which appears to show him snorting a white powder.
Yes, that's right. Obviously, this story, as you say, has been pretty much inevitable. I think most people would agree, ever since these stories emerged and the video emerged on social media a few weeks ago. It's felt like a matter of time, and the PGMOL has indeed confirmed today that David Coote, in their words, is untenable. And yes, you're right about the two of the three issues are the ones at play here. But I think fundamentally, if you take the whole situation into one piece, if you can, David Coote has done massive damage to the reputation of refereeing across this country, and the damage he's done will take a long time to erase, I think. And I imagine PGMOL know that, and I imagine that David Coote's colleagues know that too, because we all know, we're all on social media here, we all see the refereeing conspiracy theories that are out there. We see the sort of accusations of agendas that come out from various different fan bases and different people, and sometimes even people in football, like managers and coaches. And an act like this sort of gives oxygen to that fire. And I don't think anyone right-minded really believes these referees have got agendas or have got personal feelings affecting their decision-making process. But the perception created by this is that they do. And that damages everyone. So, as I say, I don't think this is a surprise at all that David Coote's been sacked. But I do think it's also worth noting that the PGMOL said in their statement that they will be very much keeping an eye on David Coote and his welfare going forward still, which I think is important.
Absolutely. There is a human being at the centre of this. The Guardian have this on their back page as well. Red card for referee is their headline. Michail, let me play devil's advocate. While there is clearly a lot of concern about the standard of refereeing in this country, whether we've fallen behind some other countries, let me suggest that actually we have short memories. We might forget all about David Coote, might we, in 6 months' time?
Yeah, to be honest, I have to say I'm a little bit uncomfortable putting David Coote's situation just in the context of wider refereeing. Even from the perspective, like Sam's mentioned there about how the PGMOL have been, and they've done this repeatedly actually in all their statements, they made a point of noting his welfare. And this is the thing, I mean, ultimately, obviously the PGMOL, they had to act. We've all seen the details and the facts so far. They didn't really have a choice. But from that, I mean, even the fact this discussion has been out there is significant punishment for someone, I'd actually say, on top of losing his job. And I think you kind of almost have to just remember that I suppose a career has been ruined as someone is going through quite a difficult situation at the moment. To bring it out wider, I think there are other questions that the PGMOL have had this season, at least from some managers, that I think it's more a case of the Coote story coming at the wrong time in the context of that. But to be honest, I'd be drawing a bit of a line between the two, or you're just drawing a distinction just because of the different nature. And there are obviously, I mean, the questions about, or some of the debates about refereeing this season are very separate, I think, to this, which is above anything, quite a sad story, I think.
It is. Let's talk about Tottenham Hotspur. Glib to say that some of their fans regard it as a pretty sad story at the moment. There is the back of the mirror, Sam Dean, and Tottenham fans not giving him much backing, but some of the players are and some of the hierarchy are.
Yeah, and that's obviously the crucial thing. And there's John Cross's story on the Mirror about the players standing behind Postecoglou, and yes, as you say, crucially, the hierarchy at Spurs too. And I think recent history shows that the pressure really gets to managers and becomes a big problem for Spurs managers when the fans turn on Daniel Levy. I think that's what's been seen in the past with the previous three managers. It happened under Jose Mourinho, it happened under Nuno Espirito Santo, and it happened under Antonio Conte. And that's almost the thing that seems to get Tottenham the most trigger happy, if you will, when it comes to their managers, that when that anger really shifts towards the club and the top of the club and away from the coaching and the sort of on-pitch performance, it almost requires it to go wider and to go deeper for Spurs to really act. Not that they are in any sort of rush right now to act on Postecoglou, whether they need to or not. That's, I think, very much up for debate still. I think you could argue a lot, and there are certainly people doing that Postecoglou's brought in a real identity and returned Spurs to the sort of style of football that their fans want to see. Obviously, in recent months, there have been some pretty disastrous results and some pretty uncomfortable performances. But I think there's enough sort of on the table still that Postecoglou's offered and could yet still offer that pressure's, although building, I don't think it's reaching a point where it's crisis time yet for Spurs, even if we are heading there.
Do you agree, Michail?
Yeah, I think actually one of the big mistakes Levy could make would be to sack Postecoglou now, especially if it was a response to dissent. Now, I suppose the thinking of that is usually that if you get a manager in that starts winning, you immediately ease out of criticism. But it does feel like we've entered we've passed a threshold with Tottenham at the moment. And you can kind of sense it when you go to the stadium and take the temperature of their fans. Now, yes, people will see Postecoglou getting into arguments with some supporters. Yes, there are some now, and you can see it on social media, that want Postecoglou out. And I would say that there are questions about his management, not least how all or nothing it is. But I think at this point, Spurs fans, they want the club to do something different, to invest in something else, or at least the majority do. And B, there's an awareness of the situation. I mean, we've said this before on the show, but despite that incredible stadium that Spurs play in, which is probably now the best in the world, maybe by the Bernabeu, or it's up there with it anyway, there's a disconnect between what that is and what the team is, which is nowhere near as gleaming. I mean, I think their wages to turnover ratio is one of the lowest in the top few divisions of England, because they have been so constrained in spending. It means they've got a wage bill that is probably closer to where a mid-table team would finish rather than kind of a Champions League team. And hence, Postecoglou has a lot of young developing players. And from all that, it would just seem such a, whatever criticisms you have of Postecoglou, it would seem such a hasty and misguided decision to get rid of him now when there is so much variance in the club, when there is a team that could grow, and clearly as well, when the squad needs a bit more substance to it as well.
And in his favour, Sam, if you think that the danger for a manager is always fan pressure building to the extent where the hierarchy feel they have to act, he's playing football the way Spurs fans are meant to always want football to be played, isn't he?
Yeah. I mean, obviously there are Spurs fans who want to see a bit more flexibility and adaptability, and I think that's very reasonable. But fundamentally, I don't think that if you went to the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium and conducted a poll of every fan there, I don't think it would be the vast majority one way or the other. I think there's quite a big split, and it's a divide, and it's certainly sort of heading and becoming more divisive. But it's not like it's completely one-sided on this debate, and I don't think that Ange out movement, if you will, is particularly strong or overwhelming right now. There's just been a few flashpoints in recent weeks, and don't forget too, they've got the Europa League still. It's a big competition for them. There's a lot of chance of winning that. I think they're the favourites for that tournament, so that could be a real unifying force. A big couple of big European away games, some good runs, some good wins, and a good run. It could go a long way for Spurs.
Absolutely. This could seem a bad dream from many months ago. Lots more to talk about this evening. Take a quick break there. When we come back, we'll look at more of the back pages, including this in the Mail. City and Chelsea hit £60 million jackpot. You're watching Back Pages tonight on Sky Sports News. With us on this occasion, Michail Delaney, chief football writer at The Independent, and Sam Dean of The Telegraph. Let's have a look at another story from The Eye, which is reporting that Luis Campos, down the bottom there, is a target for Manchester United, but also Arsenal. Michail Delaney, they are both looking to replace departed directors of football.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. He's got a good reputation in the game. I would say nearly it would make more sense for Arsenal, because I have to say my thinking after the ructions of the weekend was almost that I have to say I wondered whether United would actually sign on it at all. But given it does feel like that some of the issues with Ashworth are basically that Omar Barada as chief executive is a particularly empowered chief executive, so some of his role kind of ends up impinging on that of the sporting director. And underneath, they've got interim head of recruitment, Christophe Havel, who may well be made permanent now, who kind of does some of the, obviously, the recruitment side of the sporting director job. So I would have thought maybe United actually just persist. Like, I mean, and one of the lines we heard at the weekend was too many chiefs. But, they might just change or alter structure as well. Also, obviously, Ineos have this connection to French football through Nice, where Campos has worked. So it would make sense for that perspective. And with Arsenal, I suppose Sam will be able to speak more on this. But I suppose Arsenal would nearly want someone at this point who fits in underneath Mikel Arteta, given how powerful he is at the club now.
That's an interesting point, Sam Dean. You're well connected at Arsenal. What would the relationship be if Campos came to Arsenal between him and Arteta?
Well, I certainly think, as Miguel says, it would be more collaborative with the manager than perhaps you would normally expect from a sporting director, head coach, linear sort of path where normally the manager or the head coach would report to the sporting or technical director. I think in Arsenal's case, as it was with Edu Gaspar before his departure a few weeks ago, I think Arteta is almost on a level with that kind of sporting director position, albeit with a sort of smaller remit in the sense of focusing more on the first team and the sort of present day rather than looking 5 or 10 years ahead, as Edu's job was to do. But yeah, certainly anyone coming in to Arsenal will certainly need the approval of Arteta, and we know for sure that Arteta will be heavily involved in the recruitment process for that, which, as far as I understand it, is still at a very early stage. I don't think Arsenal have even completely decided exactly what kind of profile they want for the role, and it is possible still that they move and hire someone internally, or perhaps someone up and coming rather than someone like Campos, who's been at the top of the game really at a big club for quite a long time. So a long ways to go on that front as far as we understand it. But certainly Campos, who I think he's got into his final year at PSG now. So he's certainly a man that a lot of clubs will be looking at for sure, given his reputation. Just one more on this to you, Michail. Is it healthy or is it dangerous when the manager gets more powerful potentially than the director of football?
So I actually think there's a nuanced response to that. I think at this point, when a club appoints a manager, they should start off where the manager is no more than a head coach in an existing structure. But if the manager ends up doing, say, what Jurgen Klopp did at Liverpool, what Pep Guardiola did at Manchester City, and obviously they have a different structure there with Big Eurostone haven't been so powerful, or what Arteta has done at Arsenal, whatever about winning trophies, he's restored them to challenges again, then that's when obviously a manager has proved himself at that level and you empower him more. But I don't think at this point any manager should be coming in, any coach should be coming in as manager. It should be head coach and then almost deserve the chance to have more responsibility.
OK, let's move on to a story that the Mail are billing is exclusive by Mike Keegan about the revamped FIFA Club World Cup, which has made a lot of criticism, but it won't be criticised, judging by that headline, by the financial kings at Manchester City and Chelsea, Sam.
Yeah, absolutely. This is what the world of football was waiting to see, how much money would be involved, basically. And that sounds blunt, but I think that's the reality of it. We know that this is a tournament that many fans, certainly fans in the UK, aren't particularly interested in. We know it's a tournament that many players don't want to play in, given the workload they've got. And also probably many coaches too, as we've seen that across Europe. There are some coaches who simply aren't fussed. But the people who will care are the owners and the executives. And this story in the Mail goes to show why, really, because finally, at last, a TV deal has been agreed and the rights are now being sorted out. And it looks like, according to Michail in the Mail, that City and Chelsea will each be getting between 50 million and 60 million pounds, which, when you consider the age we're in with PSR and squad cost controls and the various difficulties that clubs have of balancing the books, that is a huge influx of money, which they'll be able to spend on the squad and to invest again. And suddenly, I think suddenly is probably the right word here, the Club World Cup looks a lot more appealing than it did maybe a few weeks ago.
It does, doesn't it, Michail? It'd be hard to argue against it being in your club's interests. Clearly there are issues with player burnout and all the rest of it, but no one listens to them when they take players and squads off on lucrative, tiring pre-season trips to Australia and the USA.
Well, that's it. But there is actually one other issue with the money, I think, that undercuts one of the motivations of this tournament. So FIFA's grand mission is that this tournament will spread the wealth of Western European football around the globe. That's obviously true in one sense. And it's true that that money needs to go around the world more from Western Europe. But, okay, it's fine with Chelsea, Manchester City and the bigger clubs, right? It makes a difference, but not that much of a difference. But if you're from one of the less wealthy leagues and you're suddenly given a huge pot of money, as we've seen in the Champions League, that could potentially distort domestic leagues outside Western Europe for a decade. You've suddenly got one or two clubs much wealthier than the other. And it feels like another aspect of this tournament that hasn't really been fully thought out and has been a bit haphazard. And also it goes against one of the missions of the tournament, which is to spread the wealth around the game.
And a lot of questions about where the money is actually coming from, Sam Dean, for all this.
Yeah, well, I think there have been some answers in the past few weeks in terms of sponsorship deals and now obviously television rights. And I think it's a lot later than many people were expecting, and I presume a lot later than FIFA were hoping. But it does feel like now, as we approach the new year, things are starting to fall into place now for this Club World Cup. Whether it gets a good reception or not, and whether European audiences want to tune into it with the time difference and the difficult hours and a summer break from football, we'll have to wait and see. But it does feel like it's now starting to get there.
5 seconds each. Good thing or bad thing, Michail?
Good idea, badly executed.
Sam?
I think it's a bad idea, but will probably work.
We'll see. Gentlemen, thank you very much indeed. Always a pleasure to have you on. Sam Dean and Michail Delaney. If you missed any of the show, another chance to see Backpages tonight at 1:30. The show is also available as a podcast. Just download Backpages wherever you get your podcasts. And join us again Tuesday night. Our guests will be Ian Ladyman of The Mail and Henry Winter.